My name is Evan Mitchell, 32 years old and the youngest of 3 siblings in the Mitchell family. Since childhood, I was labeled the black sheep for choosing a path my family couldn't understand. While my sister became a renowned surgeon and my brother a high-powered attorney, I quietly built my fortune away from their judgmental eyes. They never suspected that their failure brother would become their financial savior. Before I tell you how I became the anonymous investor behind their failing business, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe for more real-life stories. Growing up in Boston, the Mitchell family was known for excellence. Our Tudor-style home in Brookline housed not just a family, but a pressure cooker of expectations. My father Richard, a tenured engineering professor at MIT, spoke in equations and expected precision in everything. My mother Catherine ran hospital administration with the same clinical efficiency she applied to our home life. Excellence wasn't celebrated in our house, it was simply expected. My sister Natalie stood at the top of our family hierarchy. Even as kids, her straight-A report cards papered the refrigerator while my creative projects were tucked away in drawers. By 17, she had already mapped her path to Harvard Medical School with the determination of someone twice her age. Now at 36, she's a cardiothoracic surgeon whose schedule is too important to accommodate normal family events unless they revolve around her accomplishments. Natalie performed a groundbreaking procedure last month. My mother would announce to neighbors, friends, even cashiers at the grocery store. Her face would beam with the special glow reserved exclusively for my sister's achievements. Then there was Miles, 34, the responsible one. While not the academic superstar Natalie was, he compensated with relentless networking and political savvy. His law school graduation photo still occupies the center position on our parents' mantle. As a partner at Caldwell and Hayes, he specialized in corporate law, billing $600 an hour to negotiate mergers for companies whose products he never actually used. Miles just closed another major deal. My father would proudly announce at community gatherings. That boy knows how to play the game. And then there was me. The puzzle piece that never quite fit. From an early age, I approached the world differently. While Natalie memorized textbooks and Miles charmed his way through social hierarchies, I built things. Took them apart. Questioned why systems worked the way they did. This natural curiosity made me an unpredictable element in our carefully structured family. The science fair in 7th grade perfectly captured our family dynamic. Natalie presented research on cardiac muscle regeneration that had college students taking notes. Miles created a statistically sound study on consumer behavior that earned him a special commendation. I built an alternative energy system using discarded electronics that accidentally shorted the school's power grid during demonstration. The principal called my contraption creative but concerning. My parents' faces that day still burn in my memory. Not anger, disappointment mixed with confusion. They never knew quite what to do with me. Evan has potential, they'd say carefully to family friends. He just needs to apply himself properly. College brought these differences into sharper focus. While my siblings thrived in traditional academic environments, I struggled with the rigid structure. 3 semesters into a business program at Boston University, I dropped out to work on a startup with friends. My parents were mortified. "You're throwing away your future," my mother said, hands trembling around her coffee cup. "This is how you repay our investment in you," my father added, his voice level but eyes cold. Our family dinners became battlegrounds of subtle jabs. "Pass the potatoes to our entrepreneur," Miles would say, the word dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure he's too busy disrupting the dinner roll industry to reach himself." Natalie preferred clinical assessment. "Studies show college dropouts have significantly lower lifetime earnings, Evan. But I'm sure you're the exception." My parents instituted an annual achievement dinner, where we each presented our year's accomplishments. These events were particularly painful. Natalie would detail her published research and surgical innovations. Miles would outline his client acquisitions and courtroom victories. Then attention would reluctantly turn to me. "Evan has been exploring opportunities," my mother would say quickly when my projects failed to translate into terms they understood. The Christmas gathering 5 years ago marked the breaking point. We sat around the ornate dining table, crystal glasses reflecting the chandelier light, as Miles described his latest courtroom victory. The opposition practically surrendered once I presented our evidence, he said, carving his prime rib with surgical precision. The settlement will likely make headlines next quarter. Natalie nodded appreciatively while describing her upcoming speaking engagement at a medical conference in Switzerland. Their achievements pinballed across the table, while I sat quietly eating. And what about you, Evan? My father finally asked, more obligation than interest. I've been consulting with some tech startups, I replied, working on validation for a couple of interesting products. Consulting? Miles snorted, exchanging glances with Natalie. Is that what we're calling unemployed these days? Miles, my mother warned half-heartedly. Let's be honest, he continued, alcohol loosening his filter. Every family has their success stories and their other stories. Evan's just our family failure. Nothing wrong with accepting reality. The table fell uncomfortably silent. My mother studied her plate. My father cleared his throat but offered no defense. Natalie looked almost sympathetic, which somehow hurt worse than Miles' bluntness. 2 weeks later, I announced I was leaving Boston. Where will you go? My mother asked, concern mixing with relief. Texas, probably. Austin has opportunities in the sectors I'm interested in. What sectors exactly? My father pressed. What's the concrete plan here, Evan? I need to find my own path, I said simply. Miles leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Running away won't make you successful, little brother. Some people just aren't cut out for achievement. At least finish your degree first, Natalie suggested, as if I'd announced plans to join a cult rather than pursue entrepreneurship. I left despite their concerns, carrying their dismissal like stones in my pockets. The weight was substantial, but not enough to drown my determination. I would prove myself, not on their terms, but on my own. Austin welcomed me with oppressive heat and unlimited possibility. My modest apartment in the East Side had just enough space for a bed, desk, and the wall covered in sticky notes that would become my strategy board. My savings gave me 3 months before financial reality would force drastic decisions. The first 6 weeks were humbling. My resume, lacking the prestigious degrees my siblings flaunted, failed to impress traditional employers. The startup scene, while vibrant, was already saturated with eager young hopefuls chasing the same opportunities. I picked up contract work debugging websites and optimizing small business operations while searching for my real entry point. The pivotal moment came at Cosmic Coffee on South Congress. I sat working in the corner when an older gentleman in a well-worn button-down approached. Mind if I join you? The place is packed, and you look like you're not plotting world domination at the moment. This was Raymond Warner, though I wouldn't learn the significance of that name until later. At 67, Raymond had retired from active investment after 3 decades as a venture capitalist with an almost supernatural ability to identify patterns others missed. We talked for hours that first day, my laptop forgotten. You see things differently, he noted, stirring his third coffee. That's rare and valuable if you channel it properly. Raymond became both mentor and friend, meeting weekly to dissect everything from market trends to cognitive biases in investment decisions. He never handed me opportunities. That wasn't his style, but he illuminated paths I couldn't see before. My first real job came through a connection at one of Raymond's entrepreneur meetups. Verdant Tech was developing agricultural monitoring systems, and they needed someone to identify inefficiencies in their operational model. The startup ultimately failed 8 months later, but the experience proved invaluable. I understood how passion without structure implodes promising ventures. Failure is just expensive education, Raymond said when I dejectedly reported the company's collapse. What did you learn that's worth the tuition? Under his guidance, I began developing investment strategies while building my knowledge base. Using credit card debt I couldn't afford, $5,000 that terrified me each time I checked the balance. I established my first LLC, Summit Innovations. My initial investments were small and calculated. $500 in a friend's mobile app development. $800 in a local food delivery concept. $1,200 in an independent hardware manufacturer. The first two failed, teaching me hard lessons about founder temperament and market timing. The third returned just enough to repay my initial investment. Raymond reviewed my decisions without judgment. You're building the muscle. Keep flexing it. 14 months into my Austin experiment, I attended a tech showcase at Capital Factory. Among the flashy presentations and over-rehearsed pitches, I noticed a small booth staffed by 2 engineers with a prototype that seemed underwhelming at first glance. Green Life Technologies had developed a modular system for reducing industrial energy consumption. Their presentation lacked polish, but their data was exceptional. Your conversion metrics are impressive, I told James Chin, the rumpled founder who looked surprised anyone had actually read his technical specifications. But your market positioning is all wrong. We talked for 2 hours after the showcase ended. Green Life had revolutionary technology but lacked business strategy and investment. Larger firms overlooked them because the founders couldn't articulate their value proposition effectively. I negotiated a 10% equity stake for $18,000, nearly every cent I had managed to save plus another dangerous credit card extension. But beyond capital, I offered strategic guidance on positioning, pricing, and partnership development. Within 18 months, Green Life secured contracts with 4 major manufacturing companies. My equity stake, initially worth barely enough to cover my rent, suddenly represented substantial value. When a larger energy solutions provider acquired Green Life, my percentage translated to just over $2 million. I established Horizon Ventures as my primary investment vehicle, deliberately structuring it for privacy. Raymond helped me develop a reputation as a ghost investor, someone who provided both capital and strategic insight while maintaining personal anonymity. Some of the best investors are never the loudest voices in the room, Raymond advised. Let your results speak instead. My portfolio expanded methodically. 3 investments in sustainable technology. 2 in healthcare innovation platforms. 4 in consumer products addressing genuine pain points rather than manufactured needs. I developed an instinct for founders with both technical brilliance and adaptability, people who could navigate the inevitable pivots any successful venture requires. Within 5 years, my net worth exceeded $15 million. The same failure my family had dismissed was now financially secure enough to fund their dreams several times over. Yet I maintained a deliberately modest lifestyle. My apartment upgraded from shabby to comfortable but remained far from luxurious. My car was practical rather than flashy. My clothes came from department stores, not designer boutiques. Success provided validation, but I discovered something unexpected. External approval mattered less than I anticipated. The quiet confidence of creating value and recognizing opportunity became reward enough. My family never visited, rarely called, and generally seemed content to allow the problem child to exist at a comfortable distance. I found peace in this arrangement until an industry newsletter arrived in my inbox featuring a familiar name that sent my carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. The newsletter headline caught my attention immediately. Boston Elite Launch Innovative Medical Spa Concept. Below it, a photo of my siblings smiling confidently beneath the sleek sign for Elite Well Medical Spa. Natalie stood in a white coat with a stethoscope as prop, while Miles wore an impeccably tailored suit. Their venture combined cutting-edge medical treatments with luxury wellness experiences for Boston's upper echelon. My curiosity piqued. I began researching their business. The concept itself wasn't novel. Medical spas had proliferated in wealthy communities nationwide, but their particular approach leveraged Natalie's medical credentials with Miles' connections among Boston's social elite. They had secured prime real estate in Chestnut Hill, an affluent suburb where clients thought nothing of spending thousands on treatments. Their Instagram account painted a picture of immediate success. Natalie showcased their state-of-the-art equipment, while Miles posted photos with minor celebrities and influential Bostonians who had become valued clients. Local lifestyle magazines featured their revolutionary approach to wellness. What struck me most was how they referenced their backgrounds in these carefully crafted stories. "We come from a family of high achievers," Miles told Boston Magazine. "Excellence is in our DNA." Natalie added, "Our brother took a different path, but Miles and I always knew we would create something significant together." The dismissal stung despite the years and distance. Still relegated to footnote status in their narrative, I found myself scrutinizing their business model more carefully. Blake Thompson, a former college classmate now working at Boston Capital Partners, provided unexpected insight when I casually mentioned my siblings' venture during a catch-up call. "Elite well? Funny you should mention them," Blake said. "Their financials crossed my desk last week. They're seeking emergency capital." Emergency capital? They just opened last year. And they're already in trouble. Classic case of form over function. They spent $3 million on build-out, equipment, and launch marketing. The location alone costs them $40,000 monthly in rent. But their customer acquisition costs are unsustainable, and retention is abysmal. Blake shared what professional courtesy allowed. Despite the glossy exterior, Elite Well suffered from fundamental business flaws. The siblings had overspent on prestigious equipment that remained underutilized. Their staffing model featured too many administrative positions filled by Miles' social connections rather than experienced professionals. Their pricing strategy catered exclusively to ultra-wealthy clients, missing the sustainable middle market that could provide consistent revenue. "They've pitched to 6 different investment groups in Boston," Blake continued. "All passes. Their burn rate gives them maybe 4 months before they'll have to close doors or take on predatory financing." The revelation left me conflicted. My siblings had never supported my journey, quite the opposite. Their dismissal had been consistent and cutting. Yet family ties, however frayed, pulled at something deeper than rational thought. I called Raymond that evening. "You're considering helping them," he said. It wasn't a question. They wouldn't even know it was me. I could create a shell company, work through intermediaries. Raymond was quiet for a moment. "The question isn't whether you can help them, Evan. It's whether you should. And whether any help would actually benefit them in the long run." We discussed the ethical implications for hours. Revenge by allowing their business to fail would be easy but ultimately hollow. Saving them anonymously might preserve their business but wouldn't address the underlying family dynamics. "Whatever you decide," Raymond finally said, "make it a decision you can live with 5 years from now." After days of deliberation, I established Phoenix Capital as a new investment entity with no visible connection to me or Horizon Ventures. Through a business broker who knew nothing of our relationship, I extended an offer to my siblings: investment capital with specific performance conditions and oversight requirements. Their initial response, relayed through the broker, was predictably defensive. "The business is thriving but seeking strategic expansion capital," Miles claimed, unwilling to acknowledge their desperate position even when requesting rescue. The terms I offered through Phoenix Capital were firm: $750,000 immediate investment in exchange for 30% ownership and implementation of approved operational changes. A representative would monitor progress and provide guidance. Additional funding would depend on meeting specific performance metrics. After 2 weeks of negotiations, during which I knew their vendor bills were mounting, they accepted the terms with reluctance. Neither suspected their failure. Brother was now their primary investor and effectively their boss. I hired Caroline Weaver, a spa industry consultant with impeccable credentials, to serve as my eyes and ears. Her official role was investor liaison, but her actual purpose was to implement the changes needed to save the business from my siblings' mismanagement. Caroline's first report confirmed my suspicions. "The concept is solid, but execution is fundamentally flawed," she wrote. "The owners resist basic operational improvements while continuing excessive personal expenditures through the business. Specific examples filled her weekly updates. Natalie refused to adjust treatment packages despite market research showing customer hesitation at current price points. Miles micromanaged staff while missing crucial vendor negotiations. Both insisted on expensive office space within the facility that remained in use most days. They blamed external factors, market conditions, staff inadequacies, even weather patterns, rather than examining their leadership. That November, I returned to Boston for Thanksgiving, my first visit in nearly 2 years. The family gathering highlighted how dramatically our paths had diverged while perceptions remained frozen in amber. "The spa is transforming the wellness industry in New England," Natalie announced over turkey that was as dry as the conversation. "We've had interest from investors looking to franchise the concept. Our business model is being studied at Harvard Business School," Miles added, though Caroline had confirmed no such case study existed. My mother turned to me with the practiced sympathy reserved for underperforming children. "And how are your little projects in Austin, Evan? Found any direction yet?" "I'm consulting with some interesting companies," I replied vaguely. "Evan could help with your customer service team," Miles suggested with calculated condescension. "Even with his limited skills, he could probably handle appointment scheduling. We need to train him extensively," Natalie added with a laugh that others joined. My father remained characteristically silent, offering neither defense nor additional criticism. I returned to Austin with renewed determination to improve their business despite themselves. Through Caroline, I implemented changes that the siblings reluctantly accepted only because the investment agreement required it. We adjusted pricing tiers to improve retention, renegotiated vendor contracts, developed marketing strategies targeting reliable clientele rather than elusive celebrities. Gradually, business improved. Cash flow stabilized. Customer reviews trended positive. Staff turnover decreased. Yet in family phone calls, my siblings took full credit for the turnaround. "My innovative treatment protocols are changing the industry standard," Natalie claimed during one particularly grating conversation. "I've developed a revolutionary client acquisition strategy," Miles added, describing almost verbatim the system Caroline had implemented against his objections. 6 months into the investment, they requested a second funding round for expansion. The business had stabilized but remained far from profitable enough to support growth. Through Phoenix Capital, I extended additional investment with even stricter oversight conditions. My involvement in decision-making increased through detailed directive memos that Caroline enforced despite my siblings' consistent resistance. The dynamic became increasingly uncomfortable. My professional respect for them diminished with each report of arrogance and mismanagement, while their personal disregard for me continued unabated. We were locked in a strange parallel existence, their business increasingly dependent on my guidance and capital, while they remained entirely unaware of the connection. Something would eventually have to give. Phoenix Capital operated through layers of legal protection. Delaware registration, management through a separate administrative LLC, and all communications filtered through either the business broker or Caroline. The structure ensured my siblings couldn't easily discover my involvement unless I chose to reveal it. The investment terms gave me significant oversight without requiring physical presence. Quarterly financial reviews, approval rights for expenses over $5,000, and mandatory implementation of consultant recommendations provided the control needed to protect my investment while improving their business. Caroline proved invaluable as my proxy. With 20 years in luxury wellness operations, she possessed both the expertise to identify solutions and the interpersonal skills to implement them despite my siblings' resistance. Her weekly reports detailed both business metrics and personal observations. Dr. Mitchell insists on maintaining the crystal therapy room despite utilization below 10%. One report noted. When presented with usage data, she claimed certain treatments transcend metrics. Another detailed Miles management approach. Mr. Mitchell spent 40 minutes criticizing the front desk arrangement, while ignoring the scheduling system failure that cost $6,000 and canceled appointments. Staff described feeling constantly watched but never supported. Their resistance to guidance emerged as the primary obstacle to improvement. Natalie rejected adjusting treatment packages despite clear evidence that 30% remained unsold month after month. My medical training qualifies me to determine appropriate treatment protocols, she informed Caroline. MBA models don't apply to advanced wellness concepts. Miles similarly dismissed operational recommendations. When Caroline suggested renegotiating the equipment lease terms that drained monthly cash flow, he replied, "Elite clients expect cutting-edge technology. This isn't a discount spa in a strip mall." Despite these challenges, we implemented essential improvements. The pricing structure expanded to include accessible entry-level services that improved customer acquisition. Staff training enhanced retention rates. Marketing shifted from expensive magazine placements to targeted digital campaigns with measurable returns. Gradually, business stabilized. Customer reviews improved from 3.2 stars to 4.7 across platforms. Revenue increased 30% quarter-over-quarter. The business remained far from the runaway success my siblings portrayed in family conversations, but it had stepped back from the brink of collapse. During my Christmas visit that year, Elite Well dominated dinner conversation, though with a narrative completely disconnected from reality. "Our business intuition has really transformed the operation," Miles announced while serving himself a generous portion of prime rib. "Sometimes you just need to trust your instincts over conventional wisdom." Natalie nodded enthusiastically. "The medical establishment can be so rigid. I've pioneered combinatory treatments that are attracting clients from New York and even California." "That's impressive," I offered neutrally. "You should see it sometime," my mother suggested. "Though I imagine wellness concepts are quite different in, where are you living now? Austin?" "Still Austin, yes. Evan could learn a lot from observing a successful business operation," Miles said. "We might even find a role for him in customer service. Even with his limited skills, we could train him for basic client interaction. The front desk team is always hiring," Natalie added with what she likely considered generosity. My father finally spoke. "Evan needs to find his own way. Not everyone follows the same path." Whether this constituted support or further dismissal remained ambiguous. As months passed, my siblings became increasingly dependent on Phoenix Capital despite their outward confidence. The initial stabilization had created a foundation, but true profitability remained elusive. Their expansion plans, opening a second location in Providence, required additional capital beyond what operations could generate. I tightened controls with each investment round. Caroline's role expanded from advisor to de facto operations manager. My directive memos became increasingly detailed, specifying everything from staffing models to vendor selection. The business improved under this guidance, though my siblings fought each change before reluctantly acknowledging its effectiveness. Mr. Mitchell eventually implemented the inventory control system but insisted on telling staff it was his original concept. Caroline reported. Dr. Mitchell now supports the tiered treatment packages but has renamed them to claim ownership of the strategy. Their personal communications with the mysterious investor behind Phoenix Capital grew increasingly deferential as dependency increased. Quarterly review meetings, conducted via conference call with Caroline physically present in Boston, featured Miles employing his most persuasive courtroom tone while Natalie cited impressive-sounding but largely irrelevant medical statistics. "We appreciate Phoenix Capital's guidance," Miles would say. "Though as founders with specialized expertise, we hope for greater operational autonomy in the next phase." The deeper I became involved in their business, the more the contradiction troubled me. I was simultaneously essential to their success and completely dismissed in their minds. The business consumed increasing amounts of my attention, while they remained oblivious to my contribution. The situation had become unsustainable both practically and emotionally. Something had to change, but I hadn't anticipated how dramatically or suddenly that change would come. The crisis erupted on a Tuesday morning. An urgent email from Caroline arrived before dawn. "Emergency situation. Primary product supplier Luminu canceling all orders due to elite well payment delays. 60 appointments scheduled this week require these specific products. Alternatives available from premium supplier Dermatologica at 40% higher cost. Owners requesting emergency investor call at 10 a.m. Eastern. The situation perfectly encapsulated my siblings' management approach. They had delayed vendor payments while extracting excessive management fees for themselves, creating the very crisis they now expected their investor to solve. The emergency wasn't a market shift or unexpected circumstance, but the predictable consequence of their priorities. After 2 years maintaining anonymity, I recognized this moment as the natural culmination of our unsustainable arrangement. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. It was time to reveal myself as the investor behind Phoenix Capital. I called Raymond to discuss the implications. "They've pushed the situation to breaking," I explained. "I'm tired of being both their savior and their punchline." "What's your desired outcome?" Raymond asked, always focusing on the endpoint rather than the emotion. "Honestly? Recognition. Not gratitude necessarily, but acknowledgement that my path had value. That success doesn't follow only one template. Then make sure this meeting serves that purpose. Don't make it about their failure, make it about your success despite their narrative." I spent hours preparing documentation proving my ownership of Phoenix Capital and Horizon Ventures. Financial statements, legal registrations, investment history, everything needed to verify my role beyond any doubt. I booked a flight to Boston departing that afternoon. Caroline was the only person I informed of my plans. Her shocked, "Oh my God!" when I revealed my intention to attend the emergency meeting personally captured the dramatic shift this represented. "They have no idea, do they?" she asked. "None whatsoever. I'll see you tomorrow at the Boston Harbor Hotel conference room at 9:30. Please don't inform them of any changes to the meeting." The Boston Harbor Hotel offered neutral territory, professional yet public enough to discourage extreme reactions. I arrived an hour early, arranging the conference room with careful attention to positioning. My documentation placed in a leather portfolio. Water glasses at each seat. A subtle power dynamic established through preparation. Caroline arrived first, professional as always but with an undercurrent of anticipation. "They're on their way up. I've said nothing about your presence. Thank you for everything, Caroline. Whatever happens next, your work has been exceptional." My siblings arrived with the contrasting energy that defined them. Natalie strode purposefully in a designer dress beneath her white lab coat, a costume meant to emphasize her medical authority. Miles followed with nervous energy poorly disguised as confidence, his expensive suit and carefully tousled hair suggesting casual affluence. Their expressions upon seeing me perfectly captured their characters. Miles' face immediately shifted to territorial annoyance. Natalie's registered calculating reassessment. "Evan? What are you doing here?" Miles demanded. "This is a private business meeting with our investors." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I am your investor." "Very funny," Natalie said with practiced condescension. "Caroline, our Phoenix Capital representative, is running late?" "No," Caroline replied. "He's right here." I opened the leather portfolio and placed the documentation on the table. "Phoenix Capital is my investment vehicle, established specifically to fund Elite Well Medical Spa 2 years ago when you were 3 weeks from bankruptcy." Miles laughed sharply. "This has to be some kind of joke. You don't have that kind of money. $1.7 million invested to date," I continued, sliding the financial summary forward. "Through my primary investment firm, Horizon Ventures, which manages a portfolio currently valued at approximately $20 million. Natalie picked up the document, medical training making her more adept at processing information objectively. Her expression shifted from dismissal to confusion to calculated reassessment. "This can't possibly be legitimate," Miles insisted, though with less certainty. "You can't just create fake documents and expect us to believe you're suddenly some financial genius." I placed my phone on the table and dialed on speaker. Raymond, good morning. You're on with my siblings and Caroline. Good morning, Mitchells. Raymond's authoritative voice filled the room. I understand Evan is finally introducing himself properly as your investor. I've advised him on your business situation since the initial investment structure was created. And you are? Miles challenged. Raymond Warner, formerly managing partner at Westlake Venture Capital. I've been mentoring Evan since shortly after his arrival in Austin. His investment approach has proven quite remarkable. Elite Well represents one of his more sentimental investments. The silence following Raymond's introduction created space for reality to penetrate their defenses. Natalie recovered first, adaptive as always. This is unexpected, she managed, recalibrating her approach in real time. Why would you invest without telling us? Was this some kind of test? Or revenge? Miles added, instinctively looking for adversarial motivation. Were you planning this all along? Getting us dependent on your money so you could what? Pull the rug out when we needed it most? If revenge were my motivation, I replied evenly, I would have simply declined to invest when your business was failing. Phoenix Capital saved Elite Well. Every operational improvement, every financial stabilization measure, came from my direction through Caroline. So Caroline has been your spy? Miles accused, seeking someone else to blame. Caroline has been your most valuable asset, I corrected. She implemented the changes that kept your business alive despite consistent resistance. Natalie, ever strategic, shifted approaches entirely. Your business acumen is clearly more developed than we realized, Evan. That's impressive. Perhaps we should discuss how this relationship can benefit us all moving forward. 5 years of dismissing my career choices, and now suddenly my business acumen is impressive? I kept my voice level despite the emotions churning beneath. Do you remember Christmas 5 years ago when Miles called me the family failure? Or last Thanksgiving when you suggested I might be qualified to answer your phones? Miles attempted damage control. We were just pushing you to find your potential. That's what family does. No, Miles. You were reinforcing your own narrative at my expense. There's a fundamental difference. So this whole investor arrangement was about proving us wrong? Natalie asked. Initially, it was about helping family despite everything. The investment made business sense, and regardless of our personal history, you're still my siblings. But this arrangement has become unsustainable. I can't continue providing capital and direction to people who don't respect me as a person or a professional. I stood, gathering my documents. You have a decision to make. Elite Well needs additional funding to resolve the supplier crisis and continue operations. Phoenix Capital is willing to provide that funding, but only with a reset of both our business and personal relationships. You can't just walk away. Miles protested. You have fiduciary responsibilities as an investor. Review the investment agreement. Phoenix Capital can exit under multiple provisions, several of which have been triggered by your management decisions. I'm offering continued support despite having clear legal grounds to withdraw. I nodded to Caroline. Caroline will outline the specific terms for continued investment. You have 48 hours to decide whether you can work with your failure brother as your primary investor. I'm staying at the Liberty Hotel if you wish to discuss this personally once you've processed the situation. Walking out of that conference room represented the most empowered moment of my life. The shock on their faces, worth every difficult moment leading to this revelation. Yet once alone in my hotel room, emotion finally broke through my carefully maintained composure. Years of dismissal, judgment, and condescension collapsed into a private moment of vindication mixed with grief for the family relationships that should have been possible. Raymond called that evening. How are you holding up? Processing, I admitted. Part of me wishes I'd done this years ago. Another part wishes it hadn't been necessary at all. Family relationships are complex even without adding business dynamics, Raymond offered. You've handled this with more grace than many would manage. The truth in his observation provided small comfort as I waited to see how my siblings would respond to this dramatic power shift. The first text from Miles arrived at 11:42 that night. We should talk about this situation rationally. Business is business, family is family. Natalie's approach proved more clinical. Your investment strategy shows impressive foresight. Perhaps we've underestimated your professional development. Coffee tomorrow to discuss terms? I replied to neither, requiring space to process the dramatic shift in our dynamic. By morning, 3 more messages from each sibling populated my phone, their tone evolving from professional detachment to increasing urgency. The supplier situation requires immediate resolution, Natalie wrote. As primary stakeholders in Elite Well, we should align our approach promptly. Miles attempted fraternal nostalgia. Remember when we built that tree fort in the backyard? You always had the best structural ideas. Maybe we've forgotten some of those early indicators of your talents. Their messages arrived with escalating frequency throughout the day, transparently adjusting strategy based on my continued silence. By evening, Natalie referenced the important Mitchell family legacy in Boston business circles, while Miles mentioned our parents' hopes for sibling collaboration. I returned to Austin without meeting them, needing perspective that Boston couldn't provide. Caroline would handle immediate business concerns while my siblings confronted the new reality of our relationship. Back in familiar territory, I sought counsel from trusted friends. Shannon, a tech founder whose company I'd invested in early, provided particularly insightful perspective over dinner. They're experiencing cognitive dissonance, she observed. Their entire narrative about you conflicts with irrefutable evidence. That's deeply uncomfortable psychologically. So what happens next? I asked. They'll either revise their entire perspective about you, which requires admitting they were wrong for years, or they'll create an alternative explanation that preserves their self-image. My bet is on option 2. Shannon's prediction proved remarkably accurate. Within days, my siblings launched what could only be described as a reputation rehabilitation campaign. Instagram posts suddenly featured childhood photos with captions like, "Throwback to summer adventures with my brilliant brother." #family legacy #Mitchell siblings. Miles began referencing me in his business networking posts. Entrepreneurship runs in the family. Excited to share insights with my investor brother who's making waves in the tech space. #business mindset #sibling success. Natalie added me to the holiday planning email thread for the first time in years, writing, "We should coordinate schedules early. Evan's expertise will be central to our family business discussions this year." Their desperation became increasingly evident as their financial situation remained precarious. Caroline reported they had begun referring to our investor Evan in staff meetings, revising history to suggest they had known of my involvement all along. The turning point came when my parents called, their perspectives notably different. "You've been quiet about your success," my mother noted, pride belatedly discovered now that my achievements translated to terms she recognized. "Miles and Natalie shared some of what you've accomplished. Why didn't you tell us? Would it have mattered before?" I asked simply. The silence confirmed my point. My father spoke next, his typical reservation giving way to uncharacteristic reflection. "I may have judged your path too quickly, Evan. Different routes can lead to success." Their belated acknowledgement provided less satisfaction than I might once have anticipated. The validation I had sought for years arrived tainted by its obvious catalyst, not recognition of my abilities but awareness of my financial impact. As Elitewell's supplier crisis continued without resolution, my siblings escalated their reconnection attempts to daily contact. Emails detailed business updates previously deemed too confidential to share. Text messages referenced childhood memories selectively recalled to emphasize moments of connection rather than division. When these approaches yielded no response, Miles appeared unannounced at my office in Austin, claiming family concerns necessitated in-person discussion. I agreed to coffee, maintaining professional courtesy despite the boundary violation. "You've made your point," he offered immediately, mistaking the purpose of my revelation entirely. "We understand now that you've become successful in your own way. Very successful, obviously. The question is where we go from here." That depends on whether anything has fundamentally changed, Miles. Do you actually see me differently, or do you just need my continued investment? His practiced courtroom sincerity faltered. Isn't it possible that both things can be true? We need the capital, yes. But this situation has genuinely opened my eyes to my own preconceptions. And if Phoenix Capital withdraws completely? Would your newfound respect continue? His hesitation revealed everything. Family is family regardless of business arrangements. That's exactly my point. Family should have been family all along, before you knew about Phoenix Capital. Natalie's approach proved more calculated. Rather than visiting personally, she sent elaborate gifts to my office. Expensive watches, rare whiskey, tailored suits, each with cards emphasizing the unbreakable Mitchell sibling bond, and renewed appreciation for diverse paths to excellence. Caroline continued providing weekly reports, now including personal observations about my siblings' behavior. They refer to you constantly in planning meetings, speculating about what Evan would think about decisions they previously made unilaterally. Staff report confusion about the sudden elevation of a brother they never mentioned before. The pressure campaign extended beyond my siblings. Extended family members began reaching out, cousins I hadn't spoken with in years, my mother's sister in Chicago, even my father's college roommate, all casually mentioning conversations with Natalie or Miles about reconnecting with Evan during this exciting time for the family business. Friends advised caution about my siblings' true motivations. Shannon was particularly blunt. They're not sorry they dismissed you. They're sorry they dismissed your money. I consulted a therapist to navigate the complex emotions surrounding potential reconciliation. Dr. Porter provided valuable perspective during our sessions. The question isn't whether they've changed, she noted. People rarely transform fundamentally. The question is whether you can establish a new relationship with appropriate boundaries that serves your well-being. After 6 weeks of reflection, I made my decision. Through my assistant, I scheduled a family meeting at my parents' home in Boston for the following weekend. The email specified this would address both personal and business matters with a clear agenda, honest conversation about past dynamics, and concrete terms for moving forward. The response was immediate and telling. My siblings confirmed availability within minutes, while my parents responded with cautious optimism about clearing the air. The stage was set for confronting years of dismissal and determining whether genuine reconciliation was possible. The Mitchell family home looked unchanged. The same manicured lawn, the same polished brass knocker, the same sense of expectations waiting inside. Yet I arrived fundamentally transformed from the person who had left 5 years earlier. Success had not made me arrogant, but it had cultivated something more valuable, unshakable self-assurance. My mother answered the door with uncharacteristic hesitancy. Evan, welcome home. The slight emphasis on home signaled her desire to re-establish familiar dynamics. In the living room, my father stood awkwardly by the fireplace while my siblings had positioned themselves casually on the sofa, a tableau of forced normalcy. Natalie wore a casual yet obviously expensive sweater rather than her usual professional armor. Miles had foregone his typical suit for jeans and a button-down, attempting approachability. Before we begin, I said once formalities concluded, I want to establish ground rules. Complete honesty is required. Defensive responses won't move us forward. Of course. Miles agreed quickly. We're all adults here. Then let's address the fundamental issue. For years, this family established a narrative where my different approach to life and career made me less valuable. That narrative wasn't just wrong, it was actively harmful. We never meant to make you feel less valuable. My mother interjected. Intentions aside, that was the consistent message. Miles literally called me the family failure at Christmas 5 years ago, and no one at the table contradicted him. Miles shifted uncomfortably. That was an unfortunate choice of words during a stressful period. It wasn't just words, Miles. It was the culmination of a lifetime of dismissal. Every family gathering, every phone call, every interaction reinforced that my path had less worth because it didn't mirror yours or Natalie's. Natalie leaned forward with clinical detachment. Family dynamics often involve unconscious patterns. Perhaps we all played roles established in childhood without questioning their validity. That's a remarkably academic way to avoid taking responsibility, I noted. The conversation continued with predictable defensiveness. My siblings minimized past behaviors as typical family teasing, while my mother suggested I had always been too sensitive to constructive guidance. My father remained characteristically silent until I directly addressed him. Dad, you've barely spoken. What's your perspective on how this family has treated my choices? His discomfort with emotional confrontation was evident, but something had shifted in him. I failed you, he said simply. I understood your different approach more than I acknowledged, but I lacked the courage to challenge the family narrative. That was my failure, not yours. His unexpected accountability created the breakthrough moment. My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked as she recognized her role. We were so focused on traditional markers of success that we couldn't see you were creating something valuable in your own way. I'm sorry, Evan. Natalie struggled visibly with the shifting dynamic. Her identity as the family's primary achiever made my success particularly challenging to her self-perception. Your methods were so unconventional, she finally offered. I couldn't understand them because they contradicted everything I'd been taught about proper career progression. Miles proved most resistant to genuine reflection. We all make choices about how to interpret family interactions. If you chose to see our guidance as dismissal, that's unfortunate. Still deflecting responsibility, I noted. This meeting isn't about extracting apologies, Miles. It's about establishing whether we can build relationships based on mutual respect moving forward. The breakthrough with my parents created space for addressing the future. I outlined clear terms for both personal and business relationships moving forward. First, genuine respect requires acknowledging different paths to success. My approach isn't wrong or lucky, it's different and equally valid. Of course, Natalie agreed quickly. Second, our business relationship must remain separate from family dynamics. Phoenix Capital will restructure the investment with professional management oversight. My role as investor doesn't make me subordinate in personal interactions. Miles nodded reluctantly. Reasonable separation of concerns. Third, there will be no expectation of continued financial support without appropriate business justification. I'm not a personal bank account for family members who previously dismissed my capabilities. This point created visible tension, revealing the financial motivation behind their reconnection efforts. And finally, we'll establish a 3-month probationary period for rebuilding personal relationships. During this time, we'll have regular family dinners without business discussion to determine whether genuine connection is possible. My parents agreed immediately. My siblings exchanged glances before Natalie spoke for both. We accept your terms. The business needs your continued involvement, and regardless of past misunderstandings, we're still family. The restructuring of Elite Well proceeded with professional efficiency. I appointed Caroline as interim CEO with authority to implement necessary changes. My siblings remained as figureheads with reduced operational control, an arrangement that protected both the business and my investment while acknowledging their public connection to the brand. 6 weeks later, we gathered for the first of our monthly family dinners at a neutral restaurant location. The conversation remained somewhat stilted but showed modest improvement. Natalie made visible efforts to ask about my current projects with genuine interest rather than clinical assessment. Miles struggled more noticeably with the shifted dynamic but managed to discuss topics beyond his own achievements. My parents demonstrated the most significant transformation. My father engaged me in substantial conversation about investment strategies and emerging technologies, areas where he'd previously shown minimal interest. My mother asked thoughtful questions about my life in Austin without filtering my answers through comparison to my siblings. The business likewise showed improvement under professional management. Caroline implemented standardized protocols that eliminated the inefficiencies created by my siblings' conflicting approaches. Marketing focused on sustainable client relationships rather than aspirational luxury positioning. Financial controls prevented the cash flow issues that had previously threatened operations. 1 year later, the transformation in both business and family dynamics exceeded my cautious expectations. Elite Well had achieved genuine profitability under Caroline's leadership, with my siblings gradually accepting their revised roles. Natalie focused on treatment innovation rather than administrative control, while Miles leveraged his connections for strategic partnerships rather than day-to-day operations. Our personal relationships developed appropriate boundaries and unexpected depth. Natalie and I discovered common ground in our analytical approaches despite applying them to different fields. Miles and I would never share fundamental perspectives, but we established mutual respect for our contrasting strengths. Most significantly, I found peace with my family history without surrendering self-respect. The validation I had once desperately sought from them no longer defined my worth. Success had provided external confirmation, but the journey had given me something more valuable: unshakable internal confidence. This resolution taught me several profound lessons. First, forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I could release resentment, while maintaining healthy boundaries against future harm. Second, sometimes people need dramatic evidence before reconsidering fundamental assumptions. But even then, change comes gradually and imperfectly. Most importantly, I learned that true wealth transcends financial metrics. My investment portfolio created security, but my most valuable assets were self-knowledge, authentic relationships, and the courage to define success on my own terms. For those watching who might see parallels in your own family dynamics, remember that validation must ultimately come from within. External approval feels satisfying but remains fundamentally unreliable. Your unique path has inherent value, whether others recognize it or not. Have you experienced similar family dynamics where your choices were dismissed until they proved successful? How did you handle that situation? Share your stories in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, success isn't measured by others' expectations, it's defined by living authentically according to your own values. Thank you for listening to my journey.